Inside Cook County Jail, America's most overcrowded prison. The night the walls started shaking. The roar started at 2:17 a.m. Not from the outside, not from the guards, but from inside the walls of Cook County Jail itself, the largest single-site jail in America. A young inmate named Derek, only 19 years old, woke up to the sound of metal beds slamming, voices shouting, and officers sprinting past his cell. The entire tier felt like it was shaking. Not because of an earthquake, but because there were too many people packed into one place, all fighting for space, breath, and control. Derek sat up, terrified, as the noise grew louder. Someone yelled, "Back up! Back up!" Another shouted, "We don't got nowhere to go." The overcrowded dorm, meant for 48 inmates, now held more than 80. Bodies everywhere. Mattresses on the floor. People sleeping next to toilets. No air. No space. No calm. And in that moment, Derek realized something. This place is too full, and something bad is about to happen. The shouting got closer. The walls kept vibrating. And Derek braced himself, wondering, what happens when a jail is so overcrowded it can no longer hold the pressure? That's where our story begins. A jail built for order, now drowning in chaos. Cook County Jail sits in Chicago, Illinois. It looks like a small city, giant buildings, long hallways, tall fences, and towers that watch every move. But inside, the story is completely different. The jail was built decades ago for a controlled number of people. But as arrests increased, budgets shrank, and the city struggled with crime, Cook County slowly became one of the most overcrowded jails in America. Inside Derek's dorm, you could feel the problem everywhere. Bunk beds stacked to the ceiling. Mattresses pushed into hallways. People sleeping on the floor next to the toilets. Only 2 working sinks for 80-plus men. 1 officer watching the entire room. Derek wasn't in a prison. He wasn't serving a sentence. He was waiting for trial, like most people in Cook County Jail. Some waited months. Some waited years. And the longer they waited, the more crowded everything became. Inside the dorm, arguments broke out over the smallest things. Someone stepping on another person's mattress. Someone cutting the line to use the phone. Someone taking too long in the bathroom. In a place designed for quiet supervision, it felt like everyone was living on top of each other. One day, Derek saw a grown man crying quietly in the corner. Not because he was hurt, but because he had nowhere to sit. Every bench, every bed, every floor space was taken. At night, the heat built up. The smell got stronger. And the noise never stopped. But overcrowding wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. Derek started noticing officers look tired, overworked, stressed. You can't control a dorm twice the size it should be. You can't calm 80 men with only 2 staff members. And deep down, Derek knew. The shaking walls weren't the problem. They were the warning. A sign that Cook County Jail was reaching a breaking point. And the worst part? Something even bigger was coming. Something that would test every inmate, every officer, and every hallway inside America's most overcrowded jail. Too many bodies, not enough space. The next morning, Derek woke up sweating. Not because of fear this time, but because the heat inside the dorm had nowhere to escape. With more than 80 men packed into a room built for 48, the air was thick and heavy. Every breath felt warm. He looked around. People were sleeping on the floor, squeezed between metal bunk legs. Others were curled up under tables because there was no bed left. A few men slept sitting up, backs leaning against the wall, eyes barely closed. And above it all, the loudspeaker crackled. Count time. Line up. But there was no space to line up. Men bumped shoulders, stepping over mattresses and bodies. Everyone looked tired, frustrated, irritated. Small things turned into big conflicts fast. One man shouted, "Move, bro. You on my covers." Another replied, "Man ain't no space. Where you want me to go?" In Cook County Jail, space was more valuable than food. 1 extra foot of floor could decide whether your day stayed peaceful or exploded. Derek watched 2 guys shove each other over a phone slot. Only 5 phones for over 80 men. Guys waited hours just to call their families for 3 minutes. Another argument broke out at the microwave. Another over who used the sink first. Another over who took someone's seat. Officers knew the tension was rising, but there wasn't much they could do. They were outnumbered, badly. Sometimes one officer had to watch almost 100 men alone. Derek started noticing the officers walking faster, yelling louder, trying to keep control in a place that had too many people and not enough rules that made sense. You could feel the pressure building. And then, something happened the jail feared most. Medical walked in. 2 nurses entered the dorm pushing a cart. And instantly, everyone rushed forward, coughing, complaining, begging for attention. Sickness spread fast in a crowded jail. Coughs, fevers, skin infections. Even colds spread in hours because people slept almost shoulder to shoulder. One man leaned on the medical cart, struggling to breathe. Another showed a nurse a swollen hand from a fight he swore he didn't start. Someone else whispered, "I haven't slept in 2 days. I can't breathe in here." Derek stood back watching. The nurses tried their best, but even they looked overwhelmed. 2 people trying to help a long line of men who needed more attention than the facility could give. After they left, the dorm got quiet for a moment. Then someone said the words everyone feared. "Man, they need to move some of us. This place is overcapacity. Something bad is coming." But no one was moved. Instead, more inmates were brought in. And that's when Derek realized. Cook County wasn't overcrowded by accident. It was overcrowded because the system had nowhere else to put people. He sat back on his bunk, heart beating hard, as the noise in the dorm began rising once again, voices getting louder, tempers boiling faster. What happened last night wasn't just chaos. It was a warning. Something was building, something bigger than just arguments or phone disputes. Something that came when too many people were pushed into a space designed for order that could no longer contain them. And Derek was about to witness it. When pressure finally breaks. The tension in Derek's dorm had been rising for days. Every hour felt louder. Every argument felt sharper. Every small misunderstanding turned into something explosive. And on the 5th night, the pressure finally snapped. It started with something simple, a misunderstanding that never should have mattered. A man named Reggie was using the phone. He'd been waiting almost 3 hours for his turn. His daughter had a birthday coming up, and he wanted to hear her voice before lockdown. But halfway through his call, another inmate, a tall guy named Malik, stepped too close, tapping the metal shelf beside the phone. Reggie covered the receiver. "Bro, step it. I'm on the phone." Malik sighed. "You been on too long." "I got a kid." Reggie snapped. "Well, guess what? We all got somebody." Voices turned. Heads lifted. Arguments were common in the dorm, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was that everyone was tired of being packed together like they didn't matter. Whatever it was, it set everything on fire. Reggie stepped forward. Malik didn't back up. Someone whispered, "Here we go." And like that, the shove. Then another shove. Then fist. 2 men fighting in a room of 80 overcrowded, exhausted inmates became the spark that lit the whole place up. Others jumped in. Some trying to stop it. Some trying to join it. Some just trying not to get crushed in the tight space. Beds shook. Metal clanged. Voices roared. Derek pressed his back against the wall, watching in shock as the dorm transformed into chaos. Not because people wanted trouble, but because the room had too many people and not enough space to escape trouble. Within seconds, officers rushed the dorm shouting, "Stop! Get back! Get back now!" But the dorm was too crowded. There was no room for anyone to get back. People stumbled over mattresses and each other. One officer shouted into his radio for backup. Another tried to separate the first fight. But by then, 2 more had started across the room. Derek watched as one officer tried to pull Reggie away while at the same time shouting at Malik to stop swinging. The chaos grew louder, hotter, more dangerous. Then something happened Derek would never forget. An older inmate, gray hair, tired eyes, climbed onto a top bunk and yelled above everyone, "Enough! We ain't animals. The more y'all fight, the worse this overcrowding gets. Stop. For a moment, the room actually froze. The shouting slowed. The swinging slowed. Even the officers paused. The man wasn't strong. He wasn't a leader. He was just tired of seeing a place break because too many people were forced together. And somehow, his voice reached everyone. The fights didn't stop instantly, but the fire went out. The room calmed. Officers separated the men. Malik and Reggie were dragged out, both breathing hard, both defeated. But Derek noticed something more important. The dorm didn't simmer down because of fear. It simmered down because everyone, inmates and officers, were exhausted from a situation none of them created. Overcrowding wasn't a fight between inmates. It was a fight between space and pressure. And that pressure was far from done. That night, after the chaos, Derek lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the heavy breathing all around him. Someone whispered from the floor, "If it's this bad now, what's coming next?" And Derek didn't have an answer. But deep inside, he felt the same fear. Something bigger was coming. Something that would push Cook County Jail to its limit. The sick wing overload. 3 days after the fight, the dorm felt different. Quieter. But not safer. Because now, something worse than arguments was spreading. Illness. Derek woke up coughing, not hard, but enough to feel a sting in his throat. Around him, 5 other men were coughing too. Then 10. Then 20. In a dorm meant for 48 men, there were now 83 bodies sharing the same stale air. And when one person got sick, the whole room followed. That morning, a man named Torres sat up in bed shaking, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You all right?" Derek asked. Torres nodded weakly. But he wasn't all right. His skin looked pale. His breathing sounded rough. And he could barely stand. By noon, 2 more men were lying on their bunks shivering. By evening, the coughs echoed through the entire dorm like a broken engine. When the medical team finally arrived, the 2 nurses stopped at the doorway, eyes wide, realizing how many men were sick. The shorter nurse whispered, "This is too many, we don't have space in the medical wing." But she still walked in. Still tried. Still answered every cough, fever, and complaint. She checked temperatures, passed out masks, and handed over small cups of cold medicine. But it wasn't enough. People were still packed together, breathing the same air, touching the same sinks, the same phones, the same bunks. Derek watched a group of men line up for medical checks. The line stretched almost the entire length of the dorm. Some men leaned on bunks for support. Others held their stomachs, coughing nonstop. The older inmate from the bunk, the one who broke up the fight earlier, stood in line too. His shoulders drooped. He wasn't sick. He was tired. One officer walked in and froze. "So many," he muttered. Another answered, "This is what happens when we put twice the number of people in one room." They didn't say it loud, but everyone heard. Overcrowding wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was becoming a health crisis. Later that night, Derek saw officers bringing in more blankets, more cleaning supplies, and a few extra trash bags. They weren't enough, but at least they were trying. The jail wasn't built for this. The medical staff wasn't built for this. The officers weren't trained for this. The inmates weren't prepared for this. But still, people kept getting brought in through the intake doors. And the next morning, something happened that pushed the dorm to its limit. Around 10:14 a.m., just after breakfast, a loud buzz echoed through the hallway. The cell door opened, and officers walked in with 4 new inmates. For more men. For more bodies. For more bunks that didn't exist. The officer guiding them paused at the doorway, looking at the crowd inside. He sighed under his breath. "There's no room here," he said softly. But he still let the men inside. And as he did, Derek realized something. The jail wasn't going to stop filling. The dorm wasn't going to stop crowding. The pressure wasn't going to stop rising. Cook County Jail didn't have a choice. And neither did the men inside it. That night, as more coughing echoed through the darkness, Derek whispered to himself, "If sickness doesn't take us down, the pressure will." Because in a place this overcrowded, crises never come alone. Another one was about to hit. The day the water stopped running. The sickness had already drained the dorm. Men were coughing, sweating, shivering. Officers were stressed. Medical was overwhelmed. But on a Wednesday morning, just after breakfast, Cook County Jail faced a new problem. One that turned the overcrowded dorm into a pressure cooker. The water stopped running. It happened without warning. Derek walked to the sink to wash his hands after eating, turned the handle. Nothing. No flow. No drip. No sound. Just a cold metal pipe and silence. He twisted harder. Still nothing. A man nearby tried the second sink. Same result. Someone shouted from across the room. "Oh, the toilets ain't flushing." That's when the dorm erupted. In a room built for 48 men, now holding over 80, toilets were flushed constantly. Sinks ran nonstop. Water was the only thing keeping the dorm from drowning in the heat, the smell, and the sickness. Without water, chaos was seconds away. Derek stepped back as men rushed toward the sinks, trying them over and over. One man pounded the metal, yelling, "Turn on, man. Come on." Another pushed him aside. "Let me try." Someone shouted toward the officer's station. "We don't got water. Do something." The officer held up both hands. "Relax. I already called maintenance. Stay calm." But nobody stayed calm. Within minutes, the dorm felt hotter. The smell grew stronger. And people were scared, not of each other, but of the situation. In a crowded dorm, water was survival. No water meant no washing hands, no drinking, no flushing toilets, no cleaning after sickness, and no way to cool the air, no way to control infection. The coughing got worse. The arguments grew louder. Someone yelled, "This place breaking down." Another snapped back, "It been broken." And for the first time since arriving, Derek saw something in the officer's eyes. They weren't just stressed. They were concerned, because an overcrowded dorm without water wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. By noon, the toilets were backed up. People were covering their noses with shirts. The air felt thick, humid, heavy. Medical returned with masks and gloves, trying to keep the sickness from spreading faster. But they couldn't fix the smell. They couldn't fix the heat. They couldn't fix the broken pipes. All they could do was wait. Then, around 2:30 p.m., 2 maintenance workers arrived with tools and flashlights. The entire dorm went silent as they opened a metal panel in the wall. One whispered to the officer, "The pressure valve failed. The system's overloaded." Overloaded, that word again. Just like the dorm. Just like the jail. Just like everything inside Cook County. After nearly an hour of banging pipes, twisting valves, and checking panels, one of the workers shouted, "Try it now." A man ran to the sink, turned the handle. A small sputter. Water finally came out. Not strong, but enough to run. The entire room breathed a sigh of relief. But the moment the water returned, the officer said something that made Derek's stomach tighten. "Listen, this can't happen again. We're at full capacity in this section. Any more intake and we'll overload the whole system." Any more intake. As if on cue, the doors buzzed. Everyone turned. Officers walked in with 3 new inmates. The maintenance worker closed his toolbox, looked at the officer, and whispered, "This place wasn't built for this many people." But the inmates still entered. Because where else could they go? As the new arrivals found space on the floor, Derek realized something deep and unsettling. Overcrowding wasn't a chapter in Cook County's story. It was the story. And the worst part? They were nowhere near the breaking point yet. Something even bigger was coming. Something that would push the whole jail system to its edge. The night the lights went out. By the end of the week, the entire dorm felt like a balloon stretched too tight. People were sick. People were tired. People were frustrated. People were scared. And nobody had space, not even to think. But everything reached a new level one night. When the power went out. It was around 11:42 p.m. Most of the dorm was awake, tossing and turning on thin mattresses, trying not to cough, trying to ignore the heat. Derek lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. Then, without warning, the ceiling lights flickered. Twice. Then everything went dark. Pitch black. A darkness so thick Derek couldn't see his own hand in front of his face. At first, the dorm was quiet. Then the confusion exploded. What happened? Oh. Turn the lights back on. I can't see nothing. Is this another lockdown? Voices bounced around the room. People pressed against each other in the dark, trying to move, bumping into bunks, stepping on mattresses, knocking over cups and shoes. Derek heard someone fall. Another person yelled, "Back up! Stop touching me!" But no one could help it. The room was too crowded, and the darkness made everyone feel trapped. The officer at the desk tried calming the dorm. "Stay where you are. Don't move. We're getting emergency lights." But the emergency lights didn't come. There was only silence, and breathing, and coughing, and fear. For a moment, Derek thought he felt the whole room leaning, as if the weight of so many bodies was pulling the walls inward. He closed his eyes even though it didn't matter. Everything was already black. In total darkness, sounds became sharper. He heard whispers. He heard people praying. He heard someone sobbing quietly in the corner. Then somewhere in the dorm, a voice rose in anger. "This overcrowding is killing us. We ain't supposed to live like animals." Another voice fired back. "Ain't nobody here by choice. Chill." But nobody chilled. In the dark, every problem felt bigger. Every breath felt louder. Every cough felt closer. Derek gripped the edge of his bunk, feeling panic crawl up his chest. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He was afraid of what people might do in the dark, with no space to move and no officers able to see. A scuffle broke out near the far wall, two men arguing over someone stepping on someone else's mattress in the darkness. It wasn't the fight itself that scared everyone. It was the idea that a fight could spread through the whole room before officers even knew where it started. Then, finally, red emergency lights buzzed to life. Not bright, just dim red glows along the hallway corners. Enough to see outlines. Enough to stop panic from turning into chaos. The officer called again. "Everybody relax. A breaker blew. Maintenance is fixing it. Stay calm." The dorm calmed down a little. But Derek noticed something. Even with the red lights on, the officers looked shaken. Overcrowding meant more pressure on every system: water, medical, space, and now the electrical grid. Nothing in the jail was built for this many people. Nothing. The power outage lasted 47 minutes. But it felt like hours. When the lights finally flickered back on, men blinked against the brightness. A few sighed with relief. Some just closed their eyes, exhausted. But Derek didn't relax. Because right then, right as the dorm returned to normal, officers entered with clipboard checks, a sign something serious was going on behind the scenes. One officer whispered to another, "If we get one more emergency in this section, we'll have to move half the dorm." "Move them where?" The other officer replied. The first officer didn't answer. He couldn't. There was nowhere to move them. The dorm was overcrowded. The entire jail was overcrowded. The intake units were overcrowded. The medical unit was overcrowded. And if one more system failed, everyone inside the jail, inmates and staff, would be caught in the fallout. That night, Derek finally understood. Cook County wasn't just overflowing with people. It was overflowing with problems. And something big was coming. Bigger than a fight. Bigger than sickness. Bigger than a blackout. Something that would change everything inside the jail. The day they locked down the entire jail. The morning after the blackout, the dorm felt heavier than usual. Not physically, emotionally. Nobody wanted to talk. Nobody wanted to move too much or get in anyone's way. Everyone felt that something big was coming, even if they couldn't explain why. Derek sat on his bunk, staring at the floor, when the loudspeaker crackled with a voice he had never heard before. "Attention! All housing units. Prepare for a full facility lockdown." A full lockdown. The words hit the dorm like a shockwave. Men sat up fast. Some stood. Some cursed under their breath. Some looked around like they had misheard. But they hadn't. The voice repeated. "All dorms remain in place. No movement. No day room access. No phones. No showers. No visitation. This is a facility-wide lockdown until further notice. In Cook County Jail, lockdowns happened, but full lockdowns? That meant something serious had happened somewhere in the jail. And in an overcrowded facility, even a small incident could spread fast. An officer walked in with a clipboard and shouted, "Everybody to your bunks. Sit down and stay there. No exceptions." The room filled with voices. What happened? For how long? Is someone hurt? Is it because of the blackout? Is it the sickness? But the officer didn't answer. Maybe because he didn't know. Maybe because he wasn't allowed to say. He just kept saying, "Stay seated. Stay quiet. Follow instructions." Derek watched the officer pacing fast, touching his radio like he was waiting for more updates. His shoulders were tight. His eyes kept scanning the room. Whatever was happening, he was worried too. But a lockdown in an overcrowded dorm was almost a guarantee of chaos. Within the first hour, men ran out of water cups. Phones were shut off. Nobody could shower. Nobody could walk around. The coughing got louder. The heat got worse. People started arguing over nothing. Someone shouted from the back, "Man, we sick already. Y'all gonna keep us locked in like this?" Another snapped, "This jail falling apart." Then someone else yelled, "We packed in here like boxes. What you expect?" The officer kept shouting for calm, pacing faster now. A man on the floor mattress groaned, holding his stomach. Another covered his face with a shirt, shaking with fever. Two men whispered about starting something, but the older inmate, the one who had stopped fights before, told them to sit down. "Listen, you start something now, they'll take all of us to seg. Childa. Don't make this worse." The room listened, but just barely. And then something changed. A new sound came from the hallway. Heavy boots. Dozens of them. Derek turned toward the door. Officers in tactical vests marched past the dorm window. Not running. Not panicking. But moving with purpose. The kind of purpose that meant something serious was happening somewhere else in the jail. An argument? A medical emergency? A fight? A disturbance in another unit? Nobody knew. The loudspeaker crackled again. "All inmates remain on bunks. Do not stand. Do not move. This is for safety." But the overcrowded dorm was reaching a boiling point. A man shouted, "We ain't animals. Tell us what's going on." Another slammed his fist on the metal bunk. "We're packed in here like sardines and y'all locking us down?" Derek felt the pressure rising again, like the dorm was one spark away from exploding. He watched the officer gripping his radio so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then the radio crackled. The officer's eyes widened. He stepped toward the door and whispered into the radio. It spread to another tier? Whatever he heard next made him stiffen. He turned around, scanning the dorm again. The sickness, the heat, the crowding, the discomfort, the fear. Then he whispered something Derek would never forget. "This jail can't hold this many people." The lockdown continued. The tension rose. And Derek felt something he hadn't felt since the moment he stepped inside Cook County. The feeling that things were about to break, not because of the inmates, but because the jail itself was reaching its limit. And whatever was happening in the other units, it was coming their way. The spread. The lockdown stretched into its second day. No phones. No showers. No movement. No fresh air. No relief. And the overcrowded dorm, already stressed, sick, and exhausted, was turning into something dangerous. The sickness that started in Derek's dorm had now spread across multiple housing units. They didn't know the details yet, but the clues were everywhere. Officers walking faster. Medical teams rolling carts down the hall nonstop. Radios buzzing with messages no one could hear. Masks suddenly being handed out again. Tension in the air you could feel, not just here. Around noon, an officer entered the dorm holding a new box of masks. His voice was rough, his eyes tired. He didn't shout this time. He said, "Everybody take one. Everybody wear it." Someone shouted from the back. "Why? What's going on?" The officer didn't answer. Instead, he handed masks to men who were too sick to even stand. The man shaking days earlier, now looked worse. His breathing was heavy. He couldn't walk without help. Finally, someone near the front asked, "Is it spreading in other dorms?" The officer paused. His silence answered the question. He didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. He just lowered his eyes. And that silence said everything. The fear that spread faster than the sickness. The moment the officer left, whispers filled the room. "It's the whole jail. I heard Division 9 shut down movement." "No, it's Division 4. They moving sick men somewhere else." "Bro, there's nowhere else to move them." Even the older inmate, the one who kept calm during fights, looked worried now. "This place too crowded," he muttered. "One person gets sick, everybody gets sick." Derek knew he was right. The dorm wasn't a dorm anymore. It was a tightly packed box, bodies shoulder to shoulder, heat trapped inside, air barely moving. And the worst part? Every time someone coughed, half the room flinched. When medical can't keep up. Hours later, the door buzzed again. The medical team rolled in, masks on, gloves tight. But this time, there were 4 nurses, not 2. A sign things were getting worse. They checked temperatures, listened to lungs, handed out small cups of medicine. But the line kept getting longer. Every time they helped one person, 2 more joined. Derek watched as a nurse leaned close to another and whispered, "We need to move the worst ones to the medical unit." The other replied, "It's full." The medical unit, the place meant for emergencies, had no space left. Just like the dorm. Just like the jail. When they reached Torres, he could barely sit up. The nurse checked his temperature and her eyes widened. "We're taking him," she said. 2 officers came in. They lifted Torres off the mattress and supported him as they walked out. His feet dragged. His head drooped. He didn't look like the same man Derek talked to days ago. The room went silent. Not because Torres left. Because they knew. If one man gets that sick, others will follow. When the jail starts making hard decisions. An hour later, the loudspeaker came on. The same voice from before. Cold. Tired. Serious. All units remain on lockdown. Medical movement is restricted. Essential care only. Men looked at each other. Essential care only? What did that even mean? Someone asked. "So if we get sick, we just stay here?" Someone else shouted. "This jail about to fall apart." Derek felt the panic start again. The same panic that came during the blackout. He felt the pressure. He felt the overcrowding closing in. He felt the fear growing heavier. And then something happened that showed just how bad things were getting. The officer at the desk suddenly pressed his radio close and whispered, "They said another dorm has 20 sick? They don't even have beds for them." A voice crackled back, too quiet to understand. The officer pressed again. "Quarantine where? There's no space left." More static. The officer lowered the radio, exhaled deeply, shook his head. Then he whispered 4 words that chilled Derek completely. "We're out of options." The moment the jail changed. Late that night, the hallway erupted with voices. Officers shouting. Radios buzzing. Boots running. Men in the dorm pressed against the window, trying to see through the tiny slit of glass. 2 officers ran past pushing a stretcher. Another carried a bag of medical gear. The 4th shouted, "Move! Move!" The older inmate said quietly, "It's spreading faster than they can handle." Derek swallowed hard. He wanted to believe things would calm down. He wanted to believe the worst was over. But the truth was simple. Cook County Jail wasn't designed for this. It wasn't built for this. And it definitely wasn't ready for this. The sickness wasn't the real problem. The overcrowding was. And this was only the beginning. The next event, the next moment, would be bigger than everything so far. Bigger than the blackout. Bigger than the water failure. Bigger than the fights. Something was coming that would change the entire jail, in a single day. The breaking point. By the 3rd day of the lockdown, the overcrowded dorm was barely holding together. Men were exhausted. Tempers were short. Fear was everywhere. And sickness had become a normal sound in the room, coughs echoing like background noise. But the moment the jail reached its true breaking point, wasn't from sickness. Wasn't from fights. wasn't from the blackout. It came from something even more basic. Food. The breakfast that started it. Breakfast came late, hours later than usual. When officers finally pushed the food carts in, people jumped up fast. Not because they were starving, but because food was stability. Food meant things were still functioning. But when Derek grabbed his tray, his heart sank. There was barely anything on it. A scoop of watery oatmeal. A tiny piece of bread. No fruit. A spoonful so small it looked like an insult. Another man lifted his tray and shouted, "Man, what is this?" Someone else yelled, "This ain't even breakfast. This is a snack." And the officers knew it. Derek looked over their shoulders and saw the reason. The food cart was half empty. In an overcrowded jail, food was planned down to the exact tray count. But now, with so many sick inmates moved around and more people filling dorms past capacity, the kitchen had fallen behind. There simply wasn't enough. An officer tried calming the dorm. "Listen, the kitchen's backed up. They'll bring more trays." But nobody believed it. Not after days of sickness, water issues, blackouts, and lockdowns. The older inmate from before stood up and said, "They can't keep feeding 80 of us with food made for 50. This place is too full." The dorm murmured in agreement. Then the shouting started. "Where's the rest? I got nothing on my tray. My oatmeal is water. Y'all starving us now?" An officer slammed his hand on the desk. "Everybody sit down. Sit down now." But the room wouldn't calm. Not today. Not after everything. When desperation turns into danger. A younger inmate named Jamal held up his tray and yelled, "I ain't eating this. This ain't human food." And he threw it. The plastic tray hit the floor with a loud crack. That sound was the spark. In seconds, other trays hit the floor. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't violence. It was frustration exploding in a room pushed way too far. Officers rushed in, shouting commands that nobody could hear over the noise. One officer grabbed the radio. "Control. We need backup in Dorm C. Food distribution problem. Tempers rising." But Derek noticed something different this time. The officers weren't angry. They were worried. One officer's voice shook when he said, "We can't keep doing this. The jail is beyond capacity." The announcement that changed everything. A few minutes later, the loudspeaker boomed. "Attention, all housing units. Food service delay. Remain calm. Additional trays are en route." But nobody relaxed. How long? Where is it? They lying. We sick already, now this? Derek watched the officer behind the desk whisper into his radio again. "They're short 300 trays across the facility? How is that possible?" A voice crackled back. The officer whispered, "This place really about to blow." Then suddenly, the door buzzed again. Not officers. Not food carts. But command staff. 3 supervisors stepped into the dorm. With radios. Clipboards. This wasn't routine. Something serious was happening. The lead officer raised his voice. "Everyone listen up. We are working on fixing the kitchen delay. We need everyone calm while we work on moving extra trays from Division 6. But a man in the back yelled, "Division 6 is overcrowded too. They ain't got extras." The supervisor hesitated. He didn't deny it. Because he couldn't. The whole jail was overflowing. Dorm after dorm. Cell after cell. Wing after wing. Too many bodies. Not enough beds. Not enough staff. Not enough food. The systems were cracking everywhere. And that's when Derek noticed something nobody else saw. A nurse rushed past the window holding charts, saying, "Medical can't take any more. There's no space left." The officer next to her replied, "We have to, there's no choice." The word kept repeating. No space. No space. No space. No space in the dorm. No space in the medical unit. No space in intake. No space in quarantine. No space in the kitchen schedule. No space anywhere. And it was only a matter of time before something forced the entire jail into full crisis. Right when the dorm started calming down, the loudspeaker came on again. This time, the voice was shaking. Attention all units. Emergency response teams are being deployed. All staff report to crisis stations. The dorm froze. Derek felt his chest tighten. This wasn't about food anymore. Or sickness. Or fights. Or blackouts. This was bigger. Something in another part of the jail had reached its own breaking point. And whatever was happening there was about to hit every unit, including theirs. The incident in Division 9. The words, "Emergency response teams are being deployed," echoed through the dorm like a warning siren. For the first time since arriving at Cook County Jail, Derek felt the entire room go completely silent. No coughing. No arguing. No whispering. Just fear. Because everyone in Cook County knew one thing. When the emergency response team gets called, something serious is happening. Something big. Something dangerous. The officer at the desk grabbed his radio, pressing it tight to his ear. Say again. Division 9? How bad? Static. Then a voice answered, too muffled for inmates to understand. But the officer's face said everything. His jaw tightened. His eyes went wide. His posture stiffened like he had just been hit with cold water. He whispered, "It spread to Division 9? How?" "They're max security." Another burst of static. Another whisper. "No movement? Entire building locked?" That means... Someone in the dorm yelled, "Officer, what happened?" But he didn't respond. He couldn't. Because the truth was too big to say out loud. The rumor that turned into reality. Within minutes, word arrived the old-fashioned way. Whispers traveling through vents, through doors, through officers' body language, through every hallway in the jail. Division 9, the high-security building, had been hit hard. Men in that building were already packed beyond capacity. Already stressed. Already dealing with heat and sickness. And now, something snapped. Some said a whole tier got sick at once. Some said there was a medical emergency nobody caught in time. Some said an argument exploded into something bigger. Some said an inmate collapsed and it caused panic. Nobody knew the exact truth yet. But everyone knew the result. Division 9 went into full shutdown. No movement. No phones. No showers. No visitation. No library. No recreation. Nothing. And that was a problem. A dangerous one. Because once one building locks down, pressure shifts to every other building. Every hallway. Every officer. Every medical worker. Every dorm. And since Cook County was already overcrowded, there was nowhere for the pressure to go. The tension spreads into the dorm. Derek scanned the room. Everyone looked tense. Everyone was listening for clues. Everyone was scared what this meant for them. The older inmate stood up slowly, looking around the dorm like a man who had seen jails fall apart before. He spoke softly, but everyone heard him. "This jail is full to the edge. Now the edge is cracking." And he was right. The officer's radio buzzed again. He lifted it with shaking hands. "What do you mean they're pulling staff from other units? We're already short in here." More static. His eyes widened again. "You're moving who over here? We don't have beds. We don't have space." He lowered the radio, cursing under his breath. A man near the front asked, "What's going on, man? Tell us. Don't keep us in the dark." This time the officer answered. Not loudly. Not confidently. Just honestly. "We're getting transfers." The dorm froze. "Transfers?" someone asked. "From where? How many? Why here?" "Bro, we ain't got no room." The officer swallowed hard. Division 9 is shutting down their sick wing. They need to move people somewhere else. A wave of shock hit the room. "What? Here? We already got people on the floor." "They crazy? You can't fit nobody in here." The officer raised his voice. I know. But orders are orders." Derek's stomach dropped. If Division 9 inmates were being moved into their dorm, the sickness would spread faster. The tension would explode. The overcrowding would triple. The officers would struggle to keep control. And the system would break in real time. This wasn't just overcrowding anymore. This was a collapse. The moment the transfers arrived. Minutes later, the hallway filled with the sound of heavy boots. Men jumped to their bunks. Some stood, gripping metal frames. Others backed into corners, bracing themselves. The buzz of the door hit the air. Bzzzzzzzzzt. The dorm door slid open, and officers escorted 5 inmates from Division 9 inside. Not 1. Not 2. 5. Men who looked exhausted, sweaty, sick, confused, frustrated. They carried bags of belongings and plastic. Some coughed as they walked. One held his stomach like he could barely stand. The officer inside the dorm said loudly, "Everybody back up. Make space." But there was no space. People were already sleeping on the floor, already packed between bunks, already shoulder to shoulder. One of the Division 9 inmates looked around and muttered, "Man, y'all packed in here like sardines. And they bringing US? This ain't right." Another whispered, "They said more transfers coming. More bodies. More sickness. More pressure." Derek felt the room closing in. His heartbeat thumped in his ears. The air felt thinner. The older inmate sat on his bunk and rubbed his face. "We can't hold this," he said quietly. "This dorm can't hold this." And he was right. They had reached the moment everyone feared. The moment when overcrowding stopped being a problem and became a full-blown crisis. No more space. No more beds. No more medical rooms. No more time. No more backup. And Derek knew. Whatever happened next, it would push Cook County Jail into something none of them had ever experienced before. When a jail outgrows its walls, Cook County Jail wasn't built to fail. It wasn't built to drown in heat, sickness, broken pipes, blackouts, fights, or fear. It wasn't built for 80 men in a room meant for 48. Or for medical units overflowing. Or for food trays running out before sunrise. Or for entire divisions collapsing under pressure. But slowly, day by day, moment by moment, the jail grew past its own limits. Until the walls could no longer hold the weight. We saw it from the beginning. The shaking dorm. The overcrowded bunks. The sick men waiting for help. The water stopping. The lights dying. The food running short. The full lockdown. The crisis in Division 9. The transfers that had nowhere to go. Bit by bit, warning by warning, Cook County Jail showed us what happens when a system becomes too full to breathe. Inside those walls, Derek learned something most people on the outside never think about. Overcrowding isn't just a number. It's a chain reaction. Every extra body creates pressure. Every missed tray creates frustration. Every sick cough creates fear. Every blackout creates panic. Every delay creates danger. It's not about inmates versus officers. It's not about good versus bad. It's not about punishment versus justice. It's about space. About systems. About human limits. Because when a jail becomes too crowded, tension grows. The sickness spreads. Mistakes multiply. Fights erupt. The staff burnout. Emergencies escalate. And the entire facility begins to crack. Cook County Jail didn't fall apart overnight. It didn't break all at once. It shattered piece by piece, just like Derek saw from the inside. And in that slow collapse, one truth became clear. A jail can hold bodies, but it can't hold pressure forever. When the walls of Cook County started shaking that first night, nobody realized it was a warning. But by the end, the shaking wasn't from the inmates. It wasn't from fights. It wasn't from fear. It was the sound of a system stretched too far, trying desperately not to break. And for everyone trapped inside, inmates and officers, the overcrowding wasn't just a statistic. It was their reality, their struggle, their daily fight to breathe in a place running out of room, out of time, and out of answers. Because inside Cook County Jail, when there's no space left, every problem becomes a crisis, and every crisis becomes a reminder that the system itself is what needs help.